The world is in protest mode. From the Americas to Europe, from West Asia to East Asia, an unprecedented number of people have taken to the streets in recent months. All of these protests are anti-government. Some of them were peaceful, most of them were violent. The underlying themes were similar: lack of jobs, oppressive governments, dwindling economy, shrinking opportunities. And then enter Iran, the world's second biggest oil producer, now facing unprecedented protests over fuel price hike. Here's what happened. Since Friday, Iran has been gripped by violent protests. The trigger was a sudden and drastic fuel price hike, a hike of 300% no less. This sounds shocking, but let's put this figure in perspective for you. The new oil prices in Iran are 13 cents, 13 cents for a litre for the first 60 litres in a month. That's a little more than 9 rupees per litre of petrol. After the subsidy runs out, 1 litre of oil will cost 26 cents. That's almost 19 rupees. Now, this is the increased price, 19 rupees a litre of oil. Even a 300% hike has Iran selling oil among the cheapest in the world. 19 rupees a litre. You have to pay 20 rupees for a bottle of packaged drinking water in India. You can make the comparison. Oil is cheaper than water in Iran. So why this violent protest? Because the people of Iran are so impoverished, they cannot even afford that. They're angry and they think cheap or free oil is their birthright. After all, Iran is the second biggest oil producer in the world. Protests have broken out in at least 100 cities and towns in Iran. And oil may have been the trigger, but the government had been on slippery terrain for a while now. The anger had been brewing, and now it has spilled onto the streets. The reasons are familiar. Social and economic pressures have pushed the youth over the edge. Iran's economy is in a very bad shape. Unemployment has spiked. According to one estimate, more than 20% of the youth in Iran is unemployed. They want jobs. They want better governance. Corruption and US sanctions have been bleeding the economy. Government revenues have declined, so the Iranian regime decided to hike the oil prices to fund other concessions. Tehran says that it will use these oil revenues for cash payments to low-income households. They plan to give this money to 18 million families, around 60 million people. The hike could bring in $2.5 billion per annum. But the protesters want none of this. Unprecedented violence broke out on the streets. Drivers abandoned their vehicles on highways. Protesters blocked roads. They set cars on fire. They destroyed petrol pumps. Reports say more than 80,000 people across Iran took part in these protests. Some of them call for the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He has supported this hike. And he appeared before a group of students and called the protesters hooligans.
What I want to say is that no one should help these hooligans. No wise and deserving person interested in his own country, interested in his comfortable life, should help them. They are hooligans and not ordinary people.
This is not the government's only response. It is countering protest with protest. Thousands of government supporters took out a counter rally in 2 cities. They were heard chanting anti-America and anti-Israel slogans. The United Nations is calling this an alarming situation.
We're deeply concerned by reported violations of international norms and standards on the use of force, including the firing of live ammunition against demonstrators in Iran during the protests that began on Friday and have continued into this week. We're especially alarmed that the use of live ammunition has allegedly caused a significant number of deaths across the country.